Welcome to the introductory video series for New Frontiers, a science fiction roleplay community on Second Life. Today we'll dive into the basics of the sim, the lore, the story so far, and basic mechanics to get you on your way. First, a brief disclaimer. Specific dates, details, and events are almost certain to change over time, so this video should be seen as an overview, not a reference source. The New Frontiers wiki should be seen as the most up-to-date source for community lore. Navigational aids will be available throughout this video. A list of timestamps to quickly navigate around is also in the video description, for ease of use if you need to come back to a specific part of this video at a later date. First off, the setting. We are on Onia in the Mir system of the White Belt, a set of frontier worlds on the border between the Galactic Coalition of Interstellar States and Sovereign Federation of Free Worlds. Don't worry about the names, we'll cover those in a minute. The year at the time of recording is 2824. The easiest way to get the current date is taking today's date and adding 800 years. For example, July 1st, 2024 would be July 1st, 2824 in the roleplay environment. There's a lot to unpack in the world around you, so let's jump into it, starting with the governments and empires. Starting from the galactic left, the Sovereign Federation of Free Worlds, or just the Federation, is a loose association of different governments, royal houses, and independent planetary systems that are loosely aligned against the Galactic Coalition of Interstellar States. The government the Federation violently split from in a 6-year conflict between 2809 and 2815 that had become known as the Succession War. As such, the Federation is very much a fledgling government, inexperienced and some say ineffective. But Federation citizens possess a fire for independence and liberty, only seen in such a new nation on the galactic stage. The Federation has dozens of sapient species, but is largely populated by human settlers in the Volkter area, Hexians of the Veus system, and Kara of the Talshid system. A more in-depth analysis of the Federation's form of government and how to roleplay Federation characters is available on our wiki, link appearing now. Taking a trip to the galactic south, we arrive at the Sarai system, home of the Holy See and the Lumi people. A prideful species, the Lumi too are a recent addition to galactic politics. The Lumi were forcibly uplifted by a human corporation a little over 200 years ago. As such, while the Lumi are technologically at parity with at least the Federation, culturally, they remain staunch in their customs and religion. Lumi religion, called Venism, is based on the twin deities of Ymir and Sarai. Very much a theocracy to this day, the Holy See of Visra relies on historical culture and traditions, including a criminal justice system seen by many external observers as barbaric. Still, it is the spiritual home of all Lumi, and Venism remains a significant religion even outside of the Holy See's borders. The Holy See sided with the Federation during the Succession War and paid dearly for it. The raising of Visra, a planetary siege and bombardment by the Coalition and its allies in late 2814, caused significant damage to the Lumi homeworld. The Holy See is still licking the wounds of this battle to this day, and as such, many Lumi maintain a deep mistrust of the Galactic Coalition and Rokhandan Directorate. Many players choosing to roleplay Vesreen characters elect to carry the scars of the war and the raising of their homeworld. Transitioning closer to Coalition space, we find the small Vesreen Holdings. Staunchly democratic, the Vesreen operates a parliamentary government. The historical home of all Coathal sapients, the Vesreen Holdings are formed of what was prior countless Coathal nation-states. Forced into unity by unexpected contact with the Rokhandan Directorate and Onk Conglomerate. The Vesreen Holdings have a population of 31.3 billion and fought alongside the Galactic Coalition and Rokhandan Directorate during the Succession War, albeit with a less active role. Vesreen military forces are primarily ground defensive forces, with only a small fleet for anti-piracy operations maintained. Notably, Vesreen citizens are expected to fulfill 2 years of mandatory conscription into the defense forces. The Vesreen Holdings maintain a protectionary economic policy, untrusting of foreign corporations in particular. Next, we arrive at the duopoly of Ayun-Ji and Loshudai. Objectively, the biggest losers of the Succession War, the once prideful Grand Tide was reduced to a coalition protectorate state in 2814. Not all Polisu accepted this, however, and a rebel faction calling itself Loshudai or Grand Tide quickly formed, aimed at restoring the pre-war system of great houses that had governed Ayun-Ji between 5 houses for hundreds of years. Followers of the Grand Tide believe that the Republic is an illegitimate government forced on the Polisu by the Rokhandan Directorate and Galactic Coalition, with many Polisu holding contempt for the Rokhandans in particular due to a genetic attack known as the Praxis Incident. A tactic of the early Federation and Grand Tide during the war was FTL attacks, intentional attacks on faster-than-light jump stations. These giant structures needed to catch ships from an FTL jump at their destination. These stations were intentionally targeted in Coalition and Directorate space. Without them, countless starships were sent careening into the nearest star or planet. These attacks did not discriminate between military ships and civilian starliners. It is against this backdrop that the Rokhandan Directorate authorized the use of genetic corruption, or gecko attacks. These advanced weapons of mass destruction are capable of targeting living life of a specific DNA makeup, say a specific species, on a planetary scale. With gecko weapons, the Directorate was able to unleash destruction of an untold scale on the Praxis system. The Directorate and Coalition maintained Praxis was a viable military target, used as a staging ground for FTL attacking bombers. The Grand Tide maintains to this day Praxis was a civilian target, and the loss of life was abhorrent. The Praxis incident permanently damaged relations with the Directorate. After this, the Praxis Accords were signed by the Coalition and Federation, banning the use of both FTL station bombs and gecko weapons. Notably, neither the Grand Tide or Directorate signed the Praxis Accords, though they both effectively complied. Today, the Polisu remains split between the two governments competing for their legitimacy: the Republican Ayun-Ji government and the conservative Grand Tide. For now, a status quo between the two is the unhappy compromise. Directly bordering Ayun-Ji space is the former space of the White Belt Administration. Formed under Section 9 of the White Belt Accords, the armistice between the Federation and Coalition in 2815, the White Belt Administration was formed as a buffer state between the warring parties. The White Belt Administration, or WBA, was a corpocracy, a government controlled by corporations with little sway given to individual citizens. The WBA was run by a board of directors who had little responsibility other than to keep the Federation and Coalition away from each other. As a result, the WBA was rumored to be notoriously corrupt. The WBA was officially dissolved on November 2, 2823, amid corruption scandals and a military insurrection against the Federation and Coalition, led by Abigail Morrison, the WBA's then administrator. Former WBA systems have either fallen to complete lawlessness, found a local authority, or are under direct occupation by one of the major interstellar powers. Former WBA space has become informally known by reporters and historians as the Shattered Frontier. Finally of note in the frontier is Anya, home. Originally founded as a mining colony, Anya is in the frontier between Federation and Coalition space, and is loosely governed by Planetary Governor Emmett McCandless. A common misconception is that Anya is a planet. It's actually a moon of the gas giant Dion, with Dion often appearing as a second sun on clear days. Anya is Earth-like in both gravity and climate, though fauna and flora are vastly different and native. Anyan animals, insectoid-like in appearance, are particularly dangerous, and large control devices called thumpers are needed to keep them away from settlements. Next, we transition to the Onk Conglomerate. In stark contrast to the Vesreen to their galactic south, the Onk is a corporatocracy, ran by large corporations and industrial powers, and has been for hundreds of years, even predating their discovery of faster-than-light travel. The Onk are ruled by 6 companies, who in turn are ran by 6 families. In essence, the line between corporatocracy and monarchy are blurred by this fact, as the companies that run the state are themselves ran by corporate royalty. The vast majority of the Onk Conglomerate are the Gwiks, a species native to the Angoria system. While immigration is technically possible, outsider species are viewed with mistrust and suspicion by most Gwiks. Additionally complicating is the concept of birthrights. Gwiks are either high or low-born, with the distinction drawn at the traceable lineage one has to one of the original Gwiks clans. This affects lifestyle drastically, with high-born Gwiks being eligible for pristine jobs, ornate jewelry, and more, while low-born Gwiks are traditionally reserved for menial labor and forbidden from higher education. The mass adoption of space travel has challenged this in recent generations, as it's now more practical than ever to simply leave the system if one grows tired of it. This has resulted in an immense labor shortage in Gwick space, which has not seen easy resolution. The Onk military exists solely to protect commerce. With shipping lanes to protect and pirates to keep at bay, there is little other need for a military that's seen as simply wasting funds best spent elsewhere. Most Onk-flagged starships are simply cargo ships for the sprawling trade networks of the 6 companies. Though officially neutral in the Succession War and being spared the destruction it wrought, it was discovered after the armistice that the Onk were war profiteering by selling raw materials to both sides of the war and keeping trade with the other side a secret. As such, most major galactic powers view the Onk with suspicion and mistrust. Somewhere between the Frontier and Galactic Coalition is the ever-moving Roving Sun Fleet, protectors of the Anahi, a species nearly rendered extinct when their planet was destroyed centuries ago. The Anahi were able to complete 3 evacuation fleets to evacuate a mere fraction of their people, and the Roving Sun Fleet is the last surviving one. The Anahi are a proud species, and as such have declined help from other civilizations, like the Coalition. With the roving fleet now traveling at a significant portion of the speed of light, after burning their engines continuously for hundreds of years, they seem set on coasting in hope of finding a new homeworld as beautiful as their old. The Anahi are largely left alone in galactic politics. After all, it's not like they're going anywhere fast. Save for the occasional trader or diplomat, contact with outside species is rare. In greater society, it's even rarer to see an Anahi outside of the fleet, save for the occasional scouting craft. Finally, we arrive at the birthplace of humanity, Earth, and the Galactic Coalition of Interstellar States. Colloquially just the Coalition, the Galactic Coalition was formed in 2497 from the ashes of the Solar Empire, an iron-fisted dictatorship that ruled Earth and surrounding systems from the late 21st century to the early 25th century. The Galactic Coalition is the largest power in the known galaxy, both militarily and economically. However, the Succession Wars showed that power is not absolute. A sprawling, wide state of numerous colonized planetary systems, the Coalition has countless species, but is primarily populated by humans, Tavari, Lichi, and Rokhandans. However, a byproduct of the Coalition being multiculturally diverse is the significant diaspora of other species living within its borders. For example, significant Rokhandan and Lumi minorities live within Coalition space, despite having no ancestral ties to Earth or her colonies. Coalition politicians would say this diversity is an asset, but of course not all agree. The Succession War that shaped recent history in our universe started as a civil war between the Galactic Coalition and her outermost colonies, the Volctor colonies, which are now the heart of the Federation we covered at the beginning of the video. As such, the Coalition was in the fighting from the start, and saw many casualties between battles, raids on Coalition homeworlds, and outright attrition. Towards the end of the war, the Coalition began employing tactics like using vat-born legions of mass-produced soldiers. Vat-born, so called because they're mass-produced clones emerging from vats of materials used in a process called Rapid Reconstructive Cell Therapy, or RRCT, are becoming increasingly common across the galaxy as the technology becomes more affordable. We'll discuss vat-born, artificial intelligence, and other species more in Part 2, character creation, of this video series. For now, it's just pertinent to know they're mass-produced clones with little to no rights in much of the galaxy. Finally, of note for the Coalition, and recent history in general, is an event known as the Shattering. In the final year of the Succession War, the Federation, seemingly on the back foot after the raising of Visra, authorized the use of a superweapon developed, at least in part, by the Stygian Ascendancy, a race of artificial intelligence we'll discuss in a moment. While it's contested if the Federation knew the true nature of the weapon, and little is known of how it even functioned, what isn't contested is the results. The Shattering managed to destabilize and destroy every starship in faster-than-light travel across the entire known galaxy. The Shattering did not discriminate between who owned those ships, whether they were military, civilian, or whose side of the war they were on. Every single ship using its FTL drive at that moment was destroyed, and worse still, the debris being ejected into nearby space at near-relativistic speeds caused additional millions of deaths when it slammed into inhabited planets, stations, and other starships. Even today, the destruction and death toll is still being tallied, and all known spacefaring species were affected. It was this singular event that forced the White Belt Armistice of 2815, a begrudging ceasefire that left neither side satisfied with the conclusion. Today, the Galactic Coalition, much like everyone else, continues licking its wounds and rebuilding its fleet and military. Whether the shaky peace that's lasted the last 9 years will last much longer remains to be seen. Finally, we move to the Rokhandan Directorate. The Directorate is a technocracy, with some Republican aspects, but overall run by a singular leader, or Faqih, who is plugged in to a vast computer array of the experiences and wisdom of all past Faqihs. The Directorate was the first nation in the Orion Arm to discover faster-than-light travel, and is widely considered the most technologically advanced nation in the known galaxy. The Directorate is the only nation capable of fighting the Stygian Ascendancy's forces without needing overwhelming numbers. Directorate society is heavily based on the concept of clans. Clans operate much like individual nations in and of themselves, and inter-clan warfare is a recognized part of Rokhandan society, though not nearly as often or bloody as in the past. While honorable clan warfare remains a part of Rokhandan society, and this sort of dramatic internal politics limits the Directorate's desire and capabilities for external expansion, the Directorate is still capable of being a unified front against external enemies. The old adage applies, with the Rokhandan being against his brother, him and his brother against their cousin, and all Rokhandans against the stranger. While the majority of the Rokhandan Directorate remains, well, Rokhandans, a significant human minority exists, dating back to political and religious refugees from the then Solar Empire that repressed them. These humans were welcomed into Rokhandan society, provided they assimilated to clan and cultural norms. The other major species, though it's not exactly correct to call them a singular species, of the Directorate are Outworlders. Outworlder is a catch-all term for any and all of the hundreds of minor sapient species around the galaxy. Though found throughout the galaxy, the Rokhandan Directorate is known for assimilating Outworlder species into the Directorate as their own clans, with the rights therein. Though never having forcibly assimilated an Outworlder species into the Directorate, it is not uncommon for Outworlders refusing assimilation to find their system boxed in by Directorate settlers, effectively filtering their technological progress until they join the Directorate. The Rokhandans are perhaps most known for their ability to offensively face the Stygian Ascendancy, a race of precursor artificial intelligence tasked with defending the technological findings of their creators, the long-extinct Stygian race. While the Ascendancy has launched offensives against most galactic powers, including the Coalition, the Directorate is perhaps the closest technologically to Ascendancy forces, and as such, has made small gains over the years into Ascendancy space. Little is known of how the Stygian Ascendancy operates. Are they a unified singular artificial intelligence, or does a sense of individuality exist? Either way, almost all agree the Ascendancy is an existential threat to the entire Orion Arm. The Rokhandan Directorate Expeditionary Fleet, or RDEF, is the main military force of the Directorate. This name is a bit of a simplification, though, as the vast majority of RDEF assets are the military forces of individual clans. The RDEF uses its technological superiority where possible, favoring fewer ships than, say, the Coalition or Federation, but those ships are technologically superior to their peers. The Directorate has very little in the way of traditional ground forces, favoring drone swarms and isolating individual planets of resistance. The wasting of Rokhandan life on things like ground invasions, where their technological superiority is largely lost, is undesirable. The Directorate is closely militarily and economically tied to the Galactic Coalition. Though after the brutal Succession War saw little in the way of gains for the Directorate, many call this alliance into question. Still, others maintain the Coalition is needed as an ally to offset the growing aggression of the Stygian Ascendancy. This concludes part 1 of the introductory video series to New Frontiers. In this video, we reviewed the various nation-states and empires of the Orion Arm, where our story takes place. As always, more information on our lore can be found on our wiki, link appearing now, and questions can always be answered on our Discord. We hope to see you in part 2, where we'll discuss individual species in more detail and character creation. Thank you for listening.